Welcome tankers, cooBLIMEY here, and in just a few hours, the early access or open beta phase of Armored Warfare finally starts, and this is the first time the public gets a chance to play the game. And it also means that just an hour ago, the non-disclosure agreement dropped, and I can finally show you guys videos of how to play this game. And it's going to be a pretty good game. It's basically, think of it as World of Tanks 2.0. Pretty much everything is almost exactly the same as World of Tanks, only slightly better. And once they finish optimizing the game, it'll probably blow World of Tanks out of the water. So, just like World of Tanks, you start in your garage, and you have to buy your tanks. You start at Tier 1, and then you have to unlock and then buy any higher tier tanks, and you get your choice of ammunition. For a primary armament, you typically get a choice of armor-piercing or high explosive, and then some tanks have guided missiles as a secondary armament, and then just like World of Tanks, you have consumables, repair kits, first aid kits, protein bars that give you increased crew skills. Very, very similar to World of Tanks. So if you're a good player at World of Tanks, you will be a good player in Armored Warfare probably after a day or two. There's not going to be much of a learning curve at all. The differences are mostly cosmetic. If you can play World of Tanks, you're not going to have any issues playing Armored Warfare. The only thing is maybe wheeled vehicles can't turn in place and they're a bit tricky to control. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. So, in Armored Warfare, instead of nations, you have dealers, and there will be 2 dealers so far in the early test. And here I've been going through each tank. You can pause the video if you want to see what the stats are of each tank, although be wary, this is early alpha testing, and a lot of the things will change. Like, for instance, the MBT-70 was so dominant at Tier 5 that it looks like they're going to move it up to Tier 6, and stuff like that. So don't trust any of these stats. I'm sure everything will change by the time it gets to open release. So the tanks listed in red here are ones that have not been unlocked yet, and you have to do, instead of like World of Tanks where you have to get X amount of experience, these have slightly different missions. You might have to, say, do 3,000 damage while on the move in that dealer's tanks. And then doing that might unlock 1 or even more than 1 tank. And now that you've got your crew loaded, you've got your ammunition and consumables, we can go into battle here. Now, in this alpha test, there was no matchmaker, so you were getting really odd tierings. You'd have 10 top-tier tanks on one side and 1 on the other, and a lot of Tier 1s fighting Tier 5s and 6s. But in the early access phase, I'm told that there will be a matchmaker, and it will be proper matchmaking. Now, we are playing the Sheridan here, which was one of the only light tanks that have so far been released in the alpha test, and this tank is dominant. This is probably the most dominant tank in the game, or, well, maybe not the most, but it was one of the most dominant tanks. It has a phenomenal gun and missiles. And missiles are interesting. You have to stop and be perfectly still for 3 seconds before you can fire. And then when you fire a missile, it has a really long travel time. If you're shooting across a map, it could be 10 seconds. But that the entire time the missile's in the air, you can aim it. And a lot of people couldn't figure out how to control the missiles and were just shooting into the ground or off into the sky. So you want to stop, wait till you can shoot, and then fire, and as the shell is in the air, the missile, you want to keep your reticle pointed at where you want the missile to go. So it allows you to do some interesting things, like you can shoot before a target comes out into the open, and then guide the missile to him when he pops out 5 seconds later. Or you can curve missiles around obstacles or buildings. But missiles aren't actually that great, because, as I say, you have to stop for 3 seconds, then you have to spend like 5 or 10 seconds aiming it, so you're pretty much stuck out in the open for about 8 to 10 seconds. And then they have horrendous reload times, about 15 to 20 seconds. Whereas on the Sheridan here, the regular ammunition does pretty much the same damage, but it only has about a 10-second reload, and you don't have to sit out in the open for 3 seconds plus 5 or 10 more. So I like to start with a missile first, so you can shoot it when you're unspotted from a distance, but if I'm in close combat, I'm going to be switching to AP. Now, as you see, the reticle in the middle of the screen turns green once you're stopped and you're able to fire. And now you see it's stopped, and that means I cannot shoot right now. I'm going to have to stop and wait for 3 seconds before I can even fire. And this map was was by far the most beautiful map they released, but it disappeared about 2 months ago and didn't appear in the last alpha test and is not going to be in the open beta. I don't know why. They must have had some problems with it, although I didn't see any. But yeah, this map is gorgeous, and it blows anything World of Tanks has out of the water. Like, it's amazing, the beautiful architecture, and it's quite different just having modern architecture as opposed to 1940s in World of Tanks. It makes quite a different feel to the game, even though they're basically the same game. And I just got shot by a missile there, so I know I have about 20 seconds where he can't do anything to me. And as you saw there, if you watched, the missile actually followed where my reticle was going. So I've loaded regular ammo here, because I want to be able to shoot fast. And now I know he's mine, because I will reload along before he does. And the Sheridan's gun, at this tier, it was one of the most devastating guns around, even though this is actually called a light tank. Even though it's really more like a TD in World of Tanks. And now see, I gotta wait for the missile, and we hit him. And we back off to safety. And now I'm on really low health, so I gotta be very careful here. And seeing as this is an alpha test, the physics aren't perfect, and hitting poles or trees would just completely block your shot, so you might see some really odd stuff happening in some of these videos. And as you can see, the little orange logo right up at the top there, that means I've been spotted. It's basically 6 cents, but everyone in the game gets it, which is something World of Tanks should have done years ago. And there's also indicators whenever an enemy becomes visible, a little arrow will pop up on your screen telling you where they are and which direction to turn. Although I don't really like that feature, because it tells all the bad players who aren't paying attention to the map that, oh, hey, there's a guy over here. And that was Armored Warfare.